All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual seminar of the fall semester. Hopefully everybody's semester is starting out well. It's hard to imagine that we're at the end of the third week already. Today I have great pleasure in introducing Joyce Moyer. Joyce is one of our graduates, and she'll be presenting today. Joyce graduated from our MSEM program, now sits on the external advisory board for our program. She's the CEO of Jaxon Mattison Consulting LLC, a woman-owned, I can't speak today, small business that focuses on domestic and international emergency management, maritime security consultant. Mrs. Moyer is a certified emergency manager, HSEEP Instructor, which some of you may have had her in class because she does the HSEEP for us in 601, ICS Instructor, and is the Plan Section Chief for the Southeast region of the U.S. for the Department of Health and Human Services. Joyce is also committee member of the Transportation Research Board of National Academies, Subcommittee, Committee on Aviation, Security, and Emergency Management, AV090, which promotes research and education as it relates to the transportation industry. Joyce enjoys mentoring new professionals in emergency management, and she is one of our mentors in our program, traveling, reading, and spending time with her children, ages newborn 12, 13, and 17. Joyce and her husband are located in Charleston, South Carolina. Joyce, thank you and welcome, and it's all yours.
Wow, thanks. That's almost like I wrote that myself. That was wonderful. It is definitely a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you guys having me. Briefly, a little bit about myself, experience-wise for the people who are joining us. I focus on domestic emergency management as well as international emergency management consulting for foreign governments, as well as teaching emergency management, incident command strategies, and response preparation for emergencies. I also work heavily with the intelligence community here in the U.S. Done that for about 5 years, focusing on response and preparedness as well as physical security for our intelligence facilities. So anytime there's a question or something comes up, feel free to stop me. We've got a whole hour, but I only have 17 slides. I figure I can talk a little bit more than I can make you guys read on a slide anyhow. So please stop me if you have any questions, knowing that everything that I speak on is in reference to experience, either domestically here in the United States or internationally with foreign governments. I started my career as a paramedic at 18 years old and went to school for emergency management, counterterrorism, and criminal justice for about 6 years while I was a paramedic. After that, I went into the contracting realm, defense contracting for Department of Defense, and eventually just worked my way into doing it for myself. So I've got a little bit of experience all on the local level, working with the state levels, and definitely with the federal and military and international. So good span there for me to build a good foundation. I wanted to talk when I was asked to do a short lecture on something I felt relevant. I wanted to talk about common response issues based on what I've seen repeatedly from all of the different echelons, local, state, federal, and international, that they're all very common regardless of what the issue is, what the type of event that we're responding to, and I think also we can direct a lot of these to even our preparedness and mitigation efforts. Very common issues being coordination, communication, and collaboration. So this is issue number one. I really feel like having an organization is important. Having a coordinated organization, one that's pre-agreed upon, one that is trained upon, one that is sensible, is very important. Obviously, you can tell by my slides, we've got a lot of very important people tied to one another, and often this is what they end up looking like in extremely large events with multiple agencies, multiple jurisdictions. This can quickly become a problem when you need any kind of clarification and coordination. So having a command structure that is laid out professionally, has been trained upon. Again, I can't overstate that enough, obviously, and that makes sense for the type of event that you're responding to. Because obviously, if you're responding to a suburban event or a mass casualty event, it's going to be different than multiple acre wildfire. So the organization is going to have to be able to be malleable and restructurable, but still makes sense to everyone. So those are some considerations that I feel like are extremely important when you are organizing yourselves, either within your own organization or your organization with someone else. So, issue number 2. Too many generals, or you guys have probably heard it, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Same thing, I work a lot with the military, so I've used this one in the past. Way too many people in commands, not enough worker bees. So this one's definitely been an issue consistent with, regardless where I'm responding to or what type of structure, command structure I've been in. Too many people have bring their egos in. They're definitely preoccupied with their own objectives, and you lose some kind of a team player factor when you have this kind of a situation. Some of the things that I found in the past that you can do to remedy this is, 1, don't meet anybody for the first time, obviously, when you're responding. That is the worst time possible that you want to meet a new friend, is in the midst of a disaster. Definitely if you're training your plans and talking about your strategies and keeping your plans up to date and keeping current with your training, these things should not be new. You shouldn't be meeting your mutual aid assets and first responders at that time if you're doing these other things to mitigate that. And during those encounters, it's a great opportunity to dialogue with one another, build a relationship, network, understand what each other's priorities are, what their obligations are, obviously, to their own organization, what kind of resources and assets they have to lend to a response of different kind. Once you build this dialogue and you have an understanding amongst all of your mutual aid assets, this really should become less and less of an issue the more times that you have to respond together. So this is issue number 2, obviously, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Issue number 3. You can tell I like to teach from humor, but I think all of them really bring home really well my point. This one says, what a great day. I spent the morning burning bridges and the afternoon putting out fires. So this is definitely one of the major themes I see recurrent in like an incident command situation, maybe an area command situation, or a unified command situation where you have multiple organizations, multiple jurisdictions, or even if you're in your own agency and you have multiple departments, divisions, regions, sectors, anytime where you have multiple authority figures coming together and convening to attack the same problem. Everybody's got a different perspective, background, education level, obligations, priorities, and they all also have someone to report to in an authority of them as well. So all of those considerations have to be thought about ahead of time so that you're not focusing on putting out little fires and really being distracted from the objectives set forth for the resolution of whatever event that you're attending. A lot of things you can do in order to mitigate this from happening, obviously. Understanding, having a clear understanding, communicating clearly, asking questions. One of the things I like to do when I'm teaching incident command to people instructor-led incident command, is we do kind of an application of why, if you will. It's kind of like Y times 3 or Y times 4. And if you do this and you learn to apply it to a lot of the issues and questions in large groups, you'll never have a problem understanding someone else's perspective. Let me give you an example. Actually, we can do it with someone in here. If anybody want to be an example? No hands are raising? No one? Really? Okay. Okay, so Shauna? I don't know. It's Shauna. Does that mean you'll help? Okay. Anyway, basically, if just as an example, someone had said, "I like to shop at the Walmart." Okay, why number 1? You would ask why, and they said, "Well, they've got a lot of stuff. You know, there's multiple choices. You know, you can always find something." And you ask, "Okay, why is that important?" Well, it's important because it's always at a good price, and there's a lot of it. They never run out. And you ask, okay, why is that important? And you find out in the end, after asking why and digging down and peeling back the layers, that really they don't enjoy the Walmart so much, but they enjoy any store that has an abundance of the supplies that they need at a really good value, that they're not going to have to go to multiple places, they're not going to run out, and it's at a good cost, it's convenient. So you really end up with asking, you know, a couple questions, and if you ask why enough times, you're going to have a very good broad view of what the underlying draw is of importance to that person. And from that information, it prepares you better to make better decisions, better organization, structure, better understanding of the obligations they have and where they're going to fit into your response and have the most impact, because you'll have a better understanding of where they're coming from and what's important to them and why. So if someone comes in and they say, well, I think I need to be in logistics, when you start asking why a few times, you'll have a much better understanding of, 1, the relevance of them being in logistics, 2, if they really have something to offer in that department, and 3, the effects they're going to have by being in that position versus another position that maybe you need to staff. So basically, that's just one of the strategies that we use to be effective and focus people through clear understanding. Therefore, you won't be spending the morning putting out fires and being distracted from other little things that really your focus should not be on, and maybe those things need to be given to someone else to do so that you can command or fulfill your obligation and your role to the best of your ability. Thank you, Shauna. I appreciate it anyway. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is actually one of our org charts that we used within Health and Human Services. They gave it to me, and I am the plan section sheet for all of the Southeast Regional ESF 8, which is all medical, everything, people, supplies, vehicles, everything, the movement of all federal medical assets that the United States government, Department of Health and Human Services has in the Southeast region. I'm the plan chief responsible for that stuff. So when they gave me this, I kind of looked at it like, really, guys? Seriously? Because 1, I don't know who these people are. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm not familiar with every little department and every acronym. Those of you who have been in emergency management long enough, you know that to be NIMS compliant, you shouldn't have any acronyms. Obviously, this is one. The federal government came out with NIMS, and of course, they're the ones being guilty of going against it, so it's not NIMS compliant. Two, it's confusing. It's not clear, and I don't know who these people are. So I wanted to show you this as a real life example. This is an incident occurring in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill during NSSE is called National Significant or a Special Event of Significance. And this obviously is for an explosive. So if we were to have an explosive during something like address to Congress or election or something of this nature, this is the response plan. And I don't know if you guys are much better at it than I am to understand this clearly, intuitively, seamlessly, and quickly to consume this information, but I am not. So this is an issue and a problem, and an example I wanted to show you who people who do this every day still are making these same mistakes. So to go back to my example earlier of this is what I saw when I received this, obviously. So if you're in the position to be building your own organizational chart, bringing this back around, we are addressing coordination, collaboration, communication. This is not going to cut the mustard, if you would, for clear communication, coordination, and collaboration. I don't even know who these people are, much less start to plan for a response to an explosive on Capitol Hill during a highly populated, highly dense geographic area. So make sure when you're in the position and you're building out your assets and your mutual aid, make sure that it's very easy for everyone to consume. Make sure it's NIMS compliant. Remember, clear text, no acronyms. Make sure that you don't have some of these confusing org charts. Socialize your org chart with your mutual aid so that they understand it and you can get a lot of feedback if it needs to be manipulated. Ensure that it can be malleable. Also, often these disastrous events, they don't know that they're not supposed to change for your convenience, and they do. So if you have a very strict, very non-malleable organization, you're going to find yourself in a much harder and much more difficult position to command from or to respond with if you are indeed stuck with one type of organizational structure. So, because I've been there. Okay, this is good. This is another real, I know it says not for public distribution, but this event is over. This is from the United States Secret Service, and they did a great job mapping out and making these situational awareness displays for our people during this event. This is good. This is good, but this is better. So when you think that you're doing everything you can to coordinate with your mutual aid personnel, do the best you can, and then take a look at it. And often the litmus test is if you can hand it to a stranger who is not in police, fire, EMS, emergency management, hospital, any fire, and they can understand it, then you're pretty good. Because this, people may be like, well, is this the tram system or the train in Washington? Is this, what's the red, and down here it's kind of small. So if they can figure it out, this is much better. Very easy to understand where we're going to be, who is going to be there, which day, when we're going to be there. All the areas are labeled for their purpose much more clearly. So I think if you would be sensitive and logical, a lot of people oftentimes let their egos get in the way, and they make these very fancy schmancy tools and graphics, and they're very impressive. And that's great if we were going to hire you for a job, but sit behind a desk or to sell something. But we're not in that business. We need very logical, very easy to understand, quickly to consume, so that we can better help those who are responding with us or those beneath us that we are commanding in these type of events. I'm sure most of you would agree. I'm not familiar with your backgrounds individually, but as a group, I know that if you're in this program, you are interested in having the same effect on incident response and disaster preparedness mitigation that I am. I've been in this 15 years almost, so just from my experience, these things have led to easier, more seamless and integrated responses that even the current administration is promoting as far as an all hazards and whole community response preparation. So just my opinion there. Okay, coordination. Obviously, if you are not talking to the people that you are going to respond with, if you're not sharing information, if you're not talking to them and not only telling them what you're going to do, but also finding out what they intend to do, then you're only fighting half the battle. And you should expect to only win half the battle. And unless you're only out there to help half the people, you're not being fully effective. So talking to everyone, exchanging information. I know when I worked fire EMS, and it was 100 years ago, but they were very stern on their own jurisdictions and where a wreck came or where a fire laid or where and who was in command and who was in charge and who was paying for what and what resources were going to be dispatched and who got the picture on the front of the newspaper, this kind of thing. That's not what's important. And they wouldn't share a lot of information like it was top secret. What kind of training. They always wanted their training to be better than the next county over. We've come a long way, obviously, from that over the years. We're not all the way there. We always have room for improvement, but I will say that there are still, unfortunately, all of us even knowing what's going on with our intelligence communities, NSA being one, National Geospatial Intelligence being another, that they too don't communicate as well and coordinate as well as they should. So if you share information, not just intake information, but process it, coordinate, share that information, you'll come up with much better intelligence, much better information, much more accurate information to reflect truly what's going on the ground, and it gives you a better posture to respond with, more confidence, more accuracy, and you are better prepared to respond with the right tools, with the right personnel, with not too little personnel, with not too much personnel becoming a cost issue. Because when you become, I'm sure some of you may be new, and some of you may also be experienced. Regardless, if you intend to stay in this business, you will become promoted throughout and gain a responsibility to have to think about all of these things: logistics, planning, mitigation, recovery, safety, public information, and learning these kind of, I'll call them tricks. They're not tricks, they're just logic. But the things to do, the things that you wish someone would tell you before, right when you walked in the door of emergency management, makes you a much stronger communicator, much stronger commander and leader, much stronger planner, whatever your role is, much stronger responder. If you learn to ask these things like the 3 or 4-depth whys, you can also do that with how, to gain tactical strategy, clarification, But the point of this slide obviously is to coordinate with information, not only giving information, but also intaking information as well. Coordination means working together in a logical way towards one common result or goal. Obviously, Incident Command, ICS certifications. Can you guys show me with a show of hands on here who's ICS certified? Okay, great, Casey. Wonderful. So I've been teaching Train the Trainer, ICS 3 and 400, and all of the ones below that for many years. Excellent, Shauna. So you guys know that ICS is enforced through objectives. You've managed by objectives. And if they aren't logical and they aren't all being focused upon throughout your organization as one common goal, you're not going to be coordinated. We've all heard, obviously, that your weakest link is your strongest that your organization is. So if they are not on board with your objectives, you are not coordinated, and you are not operating at maximum efficiency as a response or a coordinating body. I also do a lot of strategic emergency operations center and command center analysis to make sure that each person and each, not really person per se, but each position in the command center or the operations center understands their role, understands the common mission to whatever response that they're focusing on, and it's very analytical. Actually, it's not just you know, a few phones, a fax machine, and a whiteboard. But this is one of the ways, and you can become more enlightened and more in tune to really talk to each of the people within your organization and find out, you know, how they fit in, what information to exchange, how you can communicate with them to understand the logic of the mission and to make sure that they are on board with your common result or goal, or if you are in a response in an ICS structure, the objectives. The advantages obviously are efficiency. It's much more cost-effective to be coordinated than it is to make many mistakes. So I was in an incident command structure, and I was ordering something, and what they told me they needed was a huge tractor. Well, I'm a Charleston city girl. I'm not a farmer, and so when they said tractor, I ordered a tractor, but it wasn't a normal tractor. It was a huge tractor. What they didn't tell me, and this was early in my career, and I learned many lessons from this just one event, was that not anybody can drive a tractor. You just can't hop on that thing and do whatever with it. It's not like driving a car, obviously, and I knew that. I just didn't know that you needed to order a driver with a certain certification. So I was very happy and very proud of myself when I saw this huge piece of equipment, very costly piece of equipment, show up on my scene. It was in time that they needed it. It was within budget that they needed it. It was the right type of equipment that they needed. Perfect, right? Except I had to wait 3 more days to get someone over there to drive it. And that made me want to shoot myself. But it was embarrassing, and it was a lesson that I never have forgotten. I didn't realize the credential that you needed to go along with that. It obviously was not communicated to me in a clear way, and I obviously was not educated enough at the time, nor experienced enough to ask the whys and the hows to get what they really needed. So just make my lesson yours, and understand the importance of the coordination, because it can become extremely costly when you have assets sitting at a response that aren't being utilized It slows down your objectives. It increases your costs because you're still paying for the equipment while you're waiting on personnel that are supposed to come with the equipment. So next, obviously, an advantage is strategic framework. If everyone understands the framework and the makeup and all of the managing partners and the strategic objectives, everyone understands the decision making. It's a lot less arguable, if you will. Oftentimes when I have multiple military arms, all of those people have very high ranks on their uniforms. My two ICS people in here, Shauna and Casey, you guys know you leave all of your credential, all of your titles at the door when you come into an ICS structure. But you try to tell that to those folks and they'll just show you the door. So what you have to work with, regardless of the ego and the title and the rank and the experience and the education and the credentials, is an understanding. And when you can communicate clearly and you can coordinate from a position of understanding, it makes many of the decision-making processes much easier because they're not having to stand on some type of credential or title to make a decision, because they have a very good understanding of the purpose and the objective and the outcome, because you are operating in a logical way toward a common result or goal. Oftentimes when I try to teach incident command to foreign governments, they don't understand, they got the ICS part, but what they don't understand is a unified command, or much less an area command situation, because they can't rationalize to themselves who's in charge. And what I try to impress upon them is that it doesn't matter who's in charge if you can coordinate, communicate, and understand in which to all operate towards a common goal. Therefore, the decision making as a body and as a whole becomes much easier because there's a lot less to argue against. Not to say it's going to always work, because it does not. But it is a wonderful place to start. It has been most effective in my career. So just taking that from my experience, use it for what you will. Obviously, coordination reduces gaps and redundancies. And gaps and redundancies can mean many things, but in my experience, gaps and redundancies mean money. It costs you a lot of money to identify a gap in personnel, in equipment, in any kind of logistic, even in credential. As I learned earlier, that I explained, it's extremely expensive to fill that gap once you are in a response position. Redundancies, that translates to me as waste, unless you're talking about communication, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But if you have redundant personnel, if you have excess or you have duplicative, if I had 600 canine dogs and 2 paramedics, it's an issue. I'm paying for a lot more of a resource that I don't need, when I could use that money in a better capacity to focus towards the resolution of my objective much more quickly. And it all comes back to saving lives, preservation of environment and property, obviously. All of these things that we really work towards during any type of all-hazard response. Any questions? I've been talking for a few slides now. I didn't know if there was any. I didn't see any hands. So I'm going to keep talking unless I see any hands. But these are the challenges that I've seen with coordination, just some of them, obviously, in my experience. Obviously, common terminology. Everybody says, oh, well, it's not against the law. You don't have to be NIMS compliant. You don't have to be, but the majority of people today, it is the standard. And if you want money from the government, you will be, or you won't get money back if you're a state or a county. So common terminology, it just lets all the mystery out of whatever you're trying to decipher. Honestly, guys, when we are in this type of response capacity, we don't have time and much less the desire to figure out the hieroglyphics on your map, your plans, your your codes. We don't really care. We just need to know what we can do, how we can be effective, what you need, and how we can best support. And one of the ways to do that is common terminology. Just say what it is. No mystery. Jurisdiction. Coordinating through jurisdictions, multiple jurisdictions. Again, the biggest thing that I can tell you with lack of understanding in area command, unified command, incident command, or people who don't use any kind of ICS structure or have had no training, or there's this demographic as well. The people who have taken ICS 100, 200, 700, 800 online, they just kind of flip through. They're not reading it all. I guarantee you they're not. And, they get the certificate, they get the certificate. But if you had to put them in the field and manage at the level that they have credentialed themselves online with, it's going to be excruciatingly painful for the rest of us if we're responding with them. So jurisdiction, lack of understanding of the incident command process, it's very hard to coordinate if you don't know what levels, who to talk to, how they are positioned, what their title is, making their role clear to the rest of us. So that's definitely been a challenge. Good intentions. Well, we have a lot of wonderful people who have scanners. I think I was one of them, very young, who love to listen. And sometimes they want to help. And action without direction is great, and it may get you into heaven, but it's going to make someone have a migraine about you if you're that person. So good intentions often are if you'll jump to the bottom of the slide, the self-dispatched, and I'm from the South, so I can add bless their hearts in at the bottom. But basically, they are coming to help, but the problem is we don't know that they're coming to help. We don't have logistics to support them. We're not aware of their education, training, credentials, experience. We probably aren't prepared logistically to provide them with safety equipment. We don't know we would not have been able to pre-plan to impose them into our command structure or our response cadre. So good intentions often wind up being a large coordination challenge. The United States during Hurricane Katrina, I think I want to call it, and I was there for many months as a responder. I was the triage officer for St. Bernard's Parish in the 9th Ward as well during Hurricane Katrina, which are two of the worst areas. But I think people use that opportunity to clean out every closet and garage they had to donate things to the less fortunate. And bless their hearts. But what happened is we ended up with warehouses full of donated, I'll call it junk at this point. It's been long enough, I can't without seeming too insensitive. But, a lot of good stuff was donated as well. But to tell you the truth, a lot of stuff that was not consumable was donated, and they are still today very large warehouses in New Orleans of stuff because people had good intentions. Well, what happens is it costs us a lot of money to house this stuff. We have to hire people now to go through it. Nobody wants to put it in a landfill, so we have to separate to recycle it, find people who it can be donated to go to a good use, and often that's costing us money, taxpayers' money, money to ship it, money to store it, money to pay people to do these things. So you can see how it can become a problem. Interoperable communications, I'll just be honest, most are not. Coordination challenge, you betcha. So oftentimes people have older communication systems, or they get a grant, are proactive, and get the best of the best. but they're not interoperable because many other people don't have the best of the best. So coordination challenge, communication. Every exercise I've ever either developed or been a part of, in the after action report, communications has always been at the top of the list, and I have never, knock on wood, to this day had an AAR that communications was not at the top of the list for improvement or some type of training or equipment purchase or update, something. Coordination challenge, media. Rookie mistake, anytime you don't have, and I know I said no acronyms, but I promised myself that I would explain every one of them on here. So Joint Information Center, pre-designated Joint Information Center. Now this shouldn't have to be. Occasionally the circumstances align that it would be necessary to spur of the moment designate a location for a JIC. But often if you are planning appropriately and holding your emergency management meetings and talking to your mutual aid, oftentimes these locations should be identified, pre-identified, so that if a disaster occurs or if there is an emergency, everyone, mutual aid included, they are all already aware of the pre-designated location for your Joint Information Center, which is where all media will converge on to get one message from the response body. Not doing that is going to not coordinating that is going to be an extremely large challenge for you. Information flow, we talked earlier about not only giving the information but also receiving information. So don't just take in like a sponge, but also give some out. It makes you a better mutual aid partner. You'll be respected for it. Trust me, you'll make many more friends that way than retaining information. But also, the information must go vertically and horizontally to be effective. So not just intake and output, but also report it up and down to your hierarchy, your bodies of authority above you, but as well as the responders below you and those working beside you. So I'm the plan section chief, and for those of you who are not ICS certified, there are a few people who are in my echelon of command. It is the operations section chief, logistics section chief, finance admin, myself, plans and operations. I think that's all of them. So it's wonderful if I get information from the incident commander or his deputy, the command staff, that would be any of your PIO, your public information officer, your safety officer, or your liaisons. But if it stops there and I don't spread it to the rest of the section chiefs, it's definitely going to be a coordination challenge if I have information that they don't, because each of us heavily rely on one another to be effective in our position. So you can understand. So the lesson there is to intake information, give it out as well, but also pass it vertically and horizontally to be most effective in your role. And we already discussed the self-dispatched. This is the biggest one. Communication is imperative for an efficient response during every phase of the disaster. And my little cartoon says, I used to call people, then I got into emailing and then texting, and now I just ignore everyone. And I'm sure you guys have heard as well, you know, I just don't talk on the phone as much, or I just don't like to. It's much quicker to text. But what you lose in all of that are details that may not seem relative at the moment. But anytime you guys have opted to text instead of a phone call, I know I have, having teenagers, I often find myself either texting more to get more information or texting longer than it would have if I would have picked up the phone to ask all of the things that I needed the first time. The lesson is it takes longer. The more abbreviated your communication is, it takes longer to get the information that you need in the volume you need, in the detail you need, with the accuracy you need. Communication challenges, we talked about interoperable comms. They just aren't. Don't ever expect that they will be. If you are in an environment where you have mutual aid partners, hopefully you have already tested that, you have already worked that out, and if you haven't, you've worked something out to have a mitigation plan, which is what the majority of all of us do. We mitigate them with some kind of trunking system, with some kind of redundant communication, with some other type that will be not as effective but not as painful. How about that? Clear text. I say when the adrenaline flows, so begins the trucker talk. 10-4, all of the things, all of the older police officers, they regularly go back to the old 10 codes when they need to say something quickly, especially if they're talking to other police, because they know that the person they're speaking to and addressing understands that. What they don't think about at the time is other people listening on the radio who need the same information may not know the 10 code. Pascal, you ask, what do I think the best technique of communication during all? I think the best technique, if you have it, is phone call. It's quickest. If you have phone comms, those are the quickest, and you can ask the most amount of questions. I think if you have the opportunity, like if you're in a command center, to email just for documentation's sake, I think that's highly important. Radio often are not, if you're in a rural situation, are not recorded due to the amount of data that is and cost to store that. So those two things, telephone and email, but for those reasons. Obviously, if you don't have those, then pagers work, radios work, the Palm Pilots work, and I know a lot of people are going to an iPad type disaster management system electronically, or I know a lot of us probably use Web EOC as one as well. But I think if you have it, you can't beat the telephone. Thank you so much for that question. So next, plan execution. Does everyone visualize the same plan? Obviously, you know, it's kind of like the rumor mill. We all go see a movie and then we start talking to our friends about how the movie was, and everyone's rendition is going to be different because we all saw something different. We all felt something different from what we saw on the screen, and so our output of our response, our emotional response, our enjoyment of the movie, it's all going to be different to everyone. So that comes back to communication, and it comes back to the hows and the whys. Dig down, peel that onion so that you can get really everyone to visualize the same plan. One of the most important things in emergency management is building a common operating picture, or a COP. You want to make sure that everyone sees the same thing. Everyone knows the same objective. You have buy-in of all of your people. Otherwise, you have everyone doing their own thing, and it's a little bit controlled chaos. Controlled chaos to me again, and once you get in this position, it will translate to you as well as money. So in the end, I hate to say it, but disasters, they're about saving lives and what they cost. And unfortunately, when you're in an emergency management role, that's what your job is going to come down to. The next communication challenge is media messages. I can't impress upon you the importance of making a relationship, a friendship, networking with, and building a trust with your media of your local jurisdictions, because their influence on the public and how the public, whatever picture they portray and paint for the public, based on your responses and your preparedness measures, your mitigation measures, it's all going to paint whether or not you're doing a good job. And we all work for the public. So it's very important to have their support, to have media influence you in a positive way. And they can also be a wonderful tool for preparedness messages. Also things like to control your self-dispatched volunteers, your helpers, if you will. You can often get your media to send out a message, yes, this has occurred. If you'd like to help do these things, and you can set those things with your media, instead of not doing these things, being painted in a bad or negative light, having to face all of these other after-effect challenges like the self-dispatched, these things. So if you can get with your media, build these relationships, it can really save you a lot of time and money in the future on your response to whatever event. Situation reports, very important to communicate. When I was in the MSEM program at Millersville, we had a mixed bag really of EMS, police, fire, people new, high school, recent college graduates, and everyone knew from whatever background they had the importance of communication because, obviously sit reps, and from a police perspective, they're legal documents and they can be used in court and they have to be accurate. So regardless of where your background is coming from, you probably have a good idea of why your situation report has to be timely, accurate, consistent, because they can be called upon in the future. They do reflect all of your actions. They can be used for after-action and preparedness, mitigation, planning in the future. So they're going to be highly scrutinized. So it's very important to communicate clearly. You don't have to have a master's in English, but to have complete thoughts and communicate absolutely clearly on your situational reports from any disaster. Request for mutual aid. You don't want to respond with anyone you don't know. It creates more problems than it can resolve. Predetermined and practiced and trained. What causes communications to fail during disaster? Great question. Well, failing often has to do with either the nature of the disaster, an example being overload of cell phones during like Hurricane Katrina. That was one. Or telephones going out due to the water rising, or losing electricity and your command center losing power, things like this. Often, if you've mitigated correctly, you have a generator that will keep it up. But these type of occurrences, often lessons learned in the future, definitely, but can cause communications to fail during a disaster. Overload usually is my top response for communications failing during disaster. Lack of planning, overload of data, crashes computers, this kind of thing. Unless it's like cyber attack and it takes your computer down, that occurs as well, but not usually outside of like a natural disaster. That's not going to happen. Great question, thank you. Communication, cost, and I hate to keep bringing it back around to money, but if you're going to be an emergency manager, it's always going to come down to money, unfortunately. Basically, no one has any, and if they do, they're not going to say they have any money. Everyone is penny poor, if you will, right now. So a failure to communicate means more investment in time, and more investment in time means more investment in money. Often there's no public address system, or hey, let me tell you, I've got it notated to remind me. The earthquake in 1960 in Chile, it was one of the most devastating. It had a catastrophic effect, but it was one of the first that was recorded, and it was the same year that Hawaii just installed their tsunami warning notification system. So when Chile had their earthquake, the Hawaiian tsunami system, it worked like a charm. It worked perfectly. It sounded, it was loud, it worked on time. But do you know that it was not addressed and socialized with the public, and they didn't know what it was? So very few people actually evacuated, and many people died in Hawaii, even though they had the system, they had the technology, it was new, but they didn't socialize it, they didn't address it with their public. So unfortunately, lives were still lost. So oftentimes if you still have, you have the technology to make it useful and to have an impact, but unfortunately you don't inform the people and educate, it often fails. So communication, extremely important. And last, collaboration. I joke, this one says a motivated group of people join together and they can turn problems into opportunities. Well, that is definitely a truth. Collaboration, people, when you get a motivated group, they can definitely turn problems into opportunities. What is the role of social networking in recent disaster? Social networking in recent disaster, well, there's actually a great deal of impact in social networking, but I've only got like 4 more minutes, so let me run through these slides. But Pascal, I would love to talk to you about that and give you some references of where to go to get involved more with social networking in disasters, as far as especially as far as like fusion cell data and intake of additional information. So let's talk about that more after this is concluded. Collaboration. You don't want to respond with strangers. You want to know the strengths and weaknesses of your mutual aid assets. If you don't collaborate, you won't know. You want to share resources. Increase efficiency through common goals. We talked about that earlier. In reduced response time due to the synchronicity. You obviously, if you're firing on all cylinders, you're going to be more effective, and the only way to do that is through collaboration and understanding. Increased network means increased ideas and experience. So in conclusion, these are the best practices that I can give to you in whatever 1 hour will allow us to take from one another. Don't wait to train and practice with your mutual aid responders. Develop the relationships in advance. Remember key personnel being your media as well. Test your communications, ensure interoperability. Try for redundancies. If that's not possible, understand at least where your gaps are and mitigate them with a plan. Expand on your strengths and rely on your mutual aid for areas that they can strengthen your response with. Know in advance where your logistical surpluses are and be prepared to use those. Be absolutely clear about roles, goals, responsibilities, and expectations. Everybody understands maybe what they're responsible for doing, but if you don't tell them what you expect of them, they can still be set up for failure. That just comes all back around to clear communication. Remember unity of command and span of control concepts. And that's also a safety issue, but span of control, anything 3 to 7 is optimal, but 5 is best. Anything in excess of 5 people, equipment, any of this kind of makes it too complicated to manage. So remember those concepts. Also, we've all heard if you fail to plan, plan to fail. It's absolutely true. Demystify information. Share all applicable data to those who need it in an accurate and timely manner. Do not hoard your information. It will just make you look like the bad guy. And last but not least, follow NIMS ICS practices. Understand and apply it. It is the standard. So if people are going to respond with you, they should adhere to what the standard is. I know you'll probably get some pushback on it often. I do too. But be steadfast and understand that you don't want to reduce your standard because it compromises your response. And that should be your only retort if you get pushback on using ICS and NIMS. Okay. That's all I have. I think I ended exactly at 2. I didn't want to go over, but I could talk about this stuff forever. I love it. I'm very passionate about it. My information is there at the bottom. I often mentor. I enjoy it, especially emergency managers. I like to get them involved with new initiatives and introduce them to industry stakeholders, network with them. Any way that I can help. If you have a question, feel free to reach out to me. I'm not great with the cell phone, even though I did tell you that was the main communication during a disaster, but during work hours, the quickest way to get me is through my email, okay? Pascal, I would love to talk to you about those other social networking resources if you want to email me or call. Either one's fine. I'd love to talk to you more about that. I thank you all for signing in today to listen to me talk, and I hope you all have a great day.